actually, Vermont cut the funding, I want to say 2 years ago, and then they had to lobby to get it reinstated in Vermont. I can't remember how much it is. It's not significant. It's, I think it's somewhere between 20 and 50,000 or something, if that, from each state. Don't quote me. I really don't know. It's not a lot of money. But we're a completely different organization, and a lot of folks confuse us because we're both focused on the Connecticut River. But
so it's 5 after. We have joined us while we were talking is Becky Ross, who is the New Hampshire State Conservationist with NRCS. So there she is. Becky and I have been spending a lot of time together this week. So she's here. So she's got her ears on and ready to go. We have, first thing we're going to do tonight is listen to Margie. Margie from, who is the coordinator of the New Hampshire Envirothon, which just met last week and had a live contest with 77 students. So this is first time in 2 years. So this is her victory lap tonight. So we're gonna hear about the Envirothon and where that's at. So go ahead, Margie.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to share the screen, and so you can look at the PowerPoint I made up. Let's see. Oh gosh, I don't know. All right, can you all see that?
Yep.
Yes, you can. Okay, thank you. All right, so as Dick said, I'm Margie Clark-Evan, and I'm the program coordinator for the Envirothon. I started in August, and I think this is actually the third year because there was last year was virtual and the year before was canceled. So it's been about 3 years, I think, since there was a live Envirothon. But anyway, it was a wonderful day. And I'm just going to go through a few pictures, actually a lot of pictures, just to show you what it was like. So we had, as Dick said, we had 70 kids signed up. There was a flu going around, some of it COVID, some of it, I think, normal flu, but we got 65 volunteers. And to me, that's just amazing. And most of them were in the natural resource field. Most of them were wearing their uniforms. And it was so great to see that. If you know anything about Envirothon, we have 5 different resource teams, and I'll show you those as we go along. But each of those teams was made up of 4 to 6 professionals. We had 14 current issue judges. We had 5 team guides, and then we had the runner, scorekeeper, photographer, snacks, a greeter, award runners, and a keynote speaker. Overall, the first place was Goffstown and second place was Goffstown. This picture of both teams was taken by the coach, and he actually got the awards because all his kids had other things that they had to run to after school. So they weren't there for the awards. And then third place was Timberland High School. And we were at NHTI. It was a beautiful facility and very nicely organized. And I'm just going to go through a bunch of pictures of the kids in action on this beautiful, beautiful day. So this is at Wildlife. This is probably still Wildlife. This is at a soils pit. More soils. More soils. This is at forestry. More forestry. This is, I think, lunchtime. And this is one of the current issue rooms. There were 4 different rooms of current issue judges. And the kids presented on the topic of waste to resources and especially dealing with plastics. And this was aquatics. Oh, this is soils, actually. This is aquatics. This is the forestry team. So this is the aquatics team, the forestry team, the wildlife team. This is wildlife. More wildlife. This is the presentation at the end of the day. Aubrey here was our keynote speaker. The seniors got honor cords. There were 21 seniors in the group. We had 1 middle school team. This is the middle school team winner with Audrey, our keynote speaker. And it was a good day. That's the end of it. So,
Any questions on the environment?
so, yes, any questions? I know that was very quick.
That's great.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Becky, I'd love to participate, or maybe our new New Hampshire River Steward by next year would love to participate. So I will, I guess I'll try to find your email, or if you can stick it in the chat, I will swipe it off there.
I will do that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to sign up our organization too. That sounds fun.
Wonderful. Thank you. Good.
Excellent.
I just want to know, what was the age range of the kids there? Because it looked like there were some really young kids in the last slide.
Yeah. So it's mainly a high school event, and the age group is 14 to 19, I think, for high school. But there is a middle school age also. And this is sort of like a pre-envirothon. And so that's open to 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. So a 6th grader is probably 12. So yes, we definitely had some youngins.
Thanks.
And we have on June 23rd, a recognition night at the Fisher Cats game. If you go to our website, there's a site where you can buy tickets on our website, and $4 for every ticket we sell goes to the Envirothon. The kids are going to get recognized on the field. We are having a conservation networking from 4:30 to 6:30 that night on the deck there. And I think one of the river associations is got a table there. I'll have to look at my list. But we do have tables still available.
I know we'll be there. We're pretty excited to go.
Okay, excellent, excellent.
Yeah, and I was just circling back to that, Dick. I have to double check with my partner to see whether it's possible, but we would definitely be interested in tabling as well. But I need to make sure, get permission.
Yeah, right. It's $12 to get in, and the table's free. So let me know how many people from your organization are going to be there, so we can make up name tags, so people can actually search you out and ask questions. We're hoping the students will ask, like, what did you major in college? What are you doing? What is your job? Why do you like your job? What are the fun things? What courses should I take, in college? Do you have internships? Do you have internships for high school students? Do you have internships for college students? Those kinds of kind of things that a 17-year-old might want to ask. So it would be great to have you there. All right. Who would like to go first?
Happy to go first. unless,
Okay, thank
Kathy,
you,
you're
Lauren.
dying to go first.
No, no, go ahead, Lauren, that's fine.
Okay. Great. Well, I'm a little nervous now because Becky Ross is in the room and I'm going to talk a lot about our RCPP program from NRCS. So I hope I do a good job. Let me share my screen. Oops. Too many screens going on here. Let's do. Okay, can everyone see that? Okay, great. So my name's Lauren Zielinski. I work with the Merrimack River Watershed Council. I'm the New Hampshire Water Resources Program Manager. And we have been, we started our New Hampshire office in October of last year, and we've been pretty focused on some restoration and conservation activities. So I just kind of wanted to share with everyone today, like who we are as an organization, and some of the cool things we're doing, and then kind of put out an open call for new ideas and new ways that we can collaborate together. So who is the Watershed Council? We are a nonprofit that focuses on the Merrimack River, both in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. We were founded in 1976, right after the Clean Water Act. And we kind of focus on watershed-wide issues. So land use, water quality, conservation, restoration. It changes a little bit depending on where we are. I think if you're familiar with the Merrimack, you sort of know in the headwaters in the north, pretty pristine, pretty clean, a lot of forested areas, some agriculture, but as you keep moving downstream, you start encountering some cities and some pretty urban areas in Massachusetts before it heads out to the Atlantic. So I think a lot of progress has been done cleaning up the Merrimack, but there's always more things to do. So that's our goal, is to kind of make the Merrimack kind of more interesting and more habitable and safe and healthy for everyone. So we've been around as an organization for quite a while, but we've kind of been mostly focused on Massachusetts. With as many nonprofits, we kind of ebb and flow with the funding cycles. So sometimes our New Hampshire office is pretty small or non-existent. So for us, we were reestablished in New Hampshire in October of last year. And so now we have 3 staff operating out of there, which is pretty exciting. Our executive director, Matthew Thorne, myself, the Water Resources Program Manager, and then our Restoration Projects Manager, Tyson Morrill. So if you see any of us at some New Hampshire events, feel free to say hi and introduce yourself, and we'd love to chat more. So our vision is where community and nature can flourish together. And so how do we want to do that? We want to kind of focus on these 5 areas. This is our overall goal, and we're kind of getting there one step at a time, but looking at regional leadership on policy, fish and wildlife, protecting our water resources, looking at community science and education, and then also climate resilience. So some things that we've already been doing, some environmental education. We have some programs down on the Massachusetts side in particular, ecological restoration, recently been getting more into, tree plantings. I'll get into those later. Some watershed planning, especially with some EPA grants and some state grants, collaborating with other groups. I mean, there's so many people doing great work all over our watershed and in the state of New Hampshire. It's awesome to be partnering with people. And we have a water quality monitoring program that is mostly focused in Massachusetts, but we have a couple of sites in Manchester, and we're also working, collaborating with other groups that are also monitoring on the main stem. So what are we doing specifically in New Hampshire? Like I said, we just started in October, so we're still kind of in this startup phase on this side of the watershed, and we've been pretty grant heavy recently. So we've been really focusing on some really cool projects through the Forest Service, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and then the RCPP, so the Resource Conservation Partnership Program. We're part of a group of 9 partners that are working towards source water protection. So as I'm going to go through some of the projects that we're working on or we're planning, and you'll notice like some of these will be funded by different grants and we'll work with different partners. So also just want to highlight that, you know, we don't work in a vacuum, we don't work by ourselves. All of the work we do is really collaborative and just recognizing the great work of our partners. So that's what we're doing now. What do we want to do in the future? We do want to work more on water quality coordination, kind of working with the different groups that are collecting great data on both sides of the watershed and kind of coordinating that. Doing more outreach and education, getting kids outside into nature, kind of educating adults, just doing fun things. Volunteer engagement, so trash cleanups, paddles, like getting people outside to kind of make their watershed a better place. And we'd like to work with Indigenous and underserved groups as well. I think those are really important groups to remember as we talk about environmental justice and equity and access to nature and things like that. You'll also notice that some projects I'm going to talk about are not inside the Merrimack River watershed. So one role that we're really playing kind of in this space is we are implementing some of our own projects, but we're also doing a lot of project management, you know, especially with the Source Water Protection Partnership. Those projects are all over the state and we're the lead partner on that. So we're sort of helping our other partners implement projects where their focus areas are. So now I'll go through kind of what we're doing on the ground. And I tried to list the locations here. I know we have people kind of from all over the state. You may be aware of some of these projects, or maybe they're new to you. If you want to know more information, please just connect with me afterwards. I'd be happy to share. And like I said, you know, we all work on these things together. So what we've started already is some invasive species removals. So working with the City of Concord, looking forward to working with the City of Manchester. Typically, these are kind of in city parks and public places. We've also been partnering with the Shaker Road School. They've been super enthusiastic. They'll bring their kids out and remove some invasives with us, which has been really fun. Doing a lot of native tree planting and shrub planting. So you know, most of this is through our Forest Service grant. Our goal is to plant 9,000 trees in 3 years, which is a big goal, but I think we can do it. And so we've had 3 really well-attended events so far up in Bradford, Campton, and 2 in Concord. Often we're partnering with local Trout Unlimited chapters, so they get volunteers to come out and help us plant trees, but also, again, working with the City of Concord and the Shaker Road School to get some great work done on the ground. Now we're kind of focusing on projects that are in the planning phase. So, you know, we just started these grants this past year. So these things take time. And so we're planning them, but looking forward to working with our partners to get these things done. We're working with the Nature Conservancy up in Northumberland where the Connecticut and the Upper Ammonoosuc River meet. They have a large floodplain restoration project that will kind of take place under this RCPP program. So that's really exciting. A lot of trees are going to go into the ground and it's a really cool spot with a lot of meanders and stuff if you haven't been up there. So I'm really excited to make that happen this summer. Really focusing on culvert removals or culvert replacements around fish passage or aquatic organism passage. So NIFWF, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, as well as ARM, the Aquatic Resources Mitigation Fund from New Hampshire, Fish and Game Department, they're funding up to 5 culvert replacements in the Warner River, which is super cool, getting some landscape scale restoration action happening up there. And we're working with the towns of Warner, Bradford, and Newbury. We're also looking at doing another culvert replacement on Babb Brook up in Goshen, New Hampshire. Again, working with our partners at Trout Unlimited and Fish and Game and the town of Goshen, and also the Connecticut River Conservancy with Ron, which is super nice. And then we are slowly working towards another culvert replacement, actually working with Stacy Luke out of the Merrimack County office on a culvert replacement that's just out of Rocky Pond and Loudon. So those are really exciting and kind of turn these old dusty dissolving culverts into something new and beautiful and a nice place for fish to pass, but also you know, for geomorphic stability and stuff. What next? So we're working on a small dam removal. This is very exciting, my first small dam removal. So in Francistown, New Hampshire, working to remove this dam on Brennan Brook. It's pretty old. There's no use for it at the moment, and the landowner was interested to get rid of it. And so were we, and the Dam Bureau as well. So we're kind of have a big collaborative effort happening on that. So we're hoping that will come out next summer. We're doing a lot of the permitting and planning at the current moment. Doing a lot of bank stabilization and vegetative buffers with the Connecticut River Conservancy. So we're going to work with Ron Rhodes probably on 6 of these projects over the next couple of years. And like I said before, he's kind of a magician, he's magical. So looking forward to learning more about these and doing some really cool work over in the Connecticut River watershed. And finally, we're working with 2 land trusts, the Southeast Land Trust of New Hampshire and then the Forest Society, to get some conservation easements in place. Our goal is 12 conservation easements over the next 5 years. And these are focusing on, kind of riparian areas, sensitive habitats, areas where we're trying to protect our drinking water. So those are kind of all over the state. Some are in progress, some are ideas, and some we have yet to identify. So also looking forward to that. I think that's also a very cool way that we can conserve a lot of forested and important riparian lands across the state. And this is kind of looking towards the future. So we've been part of an effort to implement the Merrimack River Watershed Comprehensive Plan for Diadromous Fishes. So NOAA Fisheries and U.S. Fish and Wildlife, as well as the state fisheries for Massachusetts and New Hampshire, pulled together this plan to try and restore fish that migrate upstream into our freshwater streams in the Merrimack. So right now it's just a plan, but they're really excited to get this plan into action. And it's a framework to balance fish restoration efforts with, existing water resources uses, as well as ecosystem services. So there's not any concrete plans on the ground yet around this, but we're kind of part of the team that's building momentum and interested to kind of learn more possibilities or project ideas around, removing fish passage barriers. So that could be small dams, impacted culverts, putting fish passages on dams that we can't remove, looking at areas that, are just thermally incompatible with our cold water fish species. So yeah, there'll be some exciting movement happening around this project in the future. But then we also are looking for more ideas. So I know that all of you are on the ground and you're working with private landowners all the time. So, if you have a great idea for an impactful project around any of these topics that I've discussed, let's talk. I think it'd be super great to kind of check it out, see what's going on. We have grant funds available for work on public and private lands. So we can kind of figure out a strategy to make something happen. And, with all the work that's already happening and future projects, there's really an opportunity for a landscape scale impact. And I would like to make one more little shout out for work that we're doing. We're actually partnering with the UNH Extension to do forest management plans for private landowners. So if this is something that a colleague of yours or someone is interested, please reach out. We'd be happy to connect them. And what else do? We do other volunteer events too. So trash cleanups, very popular. Looking at education and outreach. Like I said, we have a couple programs in our Massachusetts office that we do every year, but looking forward to expanding them in New Hampshire. Doing some hiking and paddling trips with some, cool information included to kind of educate people about the watershed and different species and processes that happen in the Merrimack, and then do some more water quality monitoring. We have a volunteer run monitoring program that's really important. So like I said, if you have any ideas or think the work that we do is interesting, or of some other opportunities you'd like to collaborate on, please let us know. We're happy to make that happen. So you can email me. I put my email at the beginning of the presentation. It's just lauren@merrimack.org. Or if you're kind of unsure where it would go, or if it's a good idea, you can always email restoration@merrimack, and then myself and Tyson check that And he does a lot of the on the ground tree planting, invasive species removal type of stuff. So that's what we do, and we're excited. We know that, you know, a lot of people and organizations are also doing other great projects. So we're just happy to share what we're doing and look forward to hearing more about what other people are doing as well.
Richard,
You're muted,
you're
Dick.
muted.
How many conservation districts do you work with?
Directly, the
Yeah.
Merrimack County has been the one we've worked with the most.
Most, yeah.
We're, as we start to implement some projects, we're working kind of tangentially with more and more, but you know, one of the reasons I was very happy to be invited to this is kind of just understand who's where and who's doing what, and how we can
Right,
collaborate
yeah.
together.
Yeah. Well, this is very exciting to learn about because I'm in Rockingham County, so there's the Spit Brook goes into the Merrimack and a little bit out of Londonderry and Derry.
Laura, can you tell me what you're doing in Warner River? Because I'm pretty close to the Warner River.
Yeah.
So what's the project there?
I would say the big one is this culvert replacement, the series of 5 culvert replacements. So those are town-owned culverts. The Fish and Wildlife Foundation, they're funding one full culvert removal, and then the ARM grant is funding a lot of the design work that will go into them. And then the towns themselves are often pitching in some in-kind support, or, you know, they get their construction crew out there for the summer to make it happen. Still looking for more funding on that one. So I think we have 1.5 fully funded. Others, we have applications out to make it happen. And then I think, you know, the towns are trying to figure out how much they can contribute and when. Usually it's an issue of their crews are kind of full all summer. So making that schedule work. But it's also in collaboration with some other stream restoration work. Trout Unlimited does a lot of the strategic wood additions where they, it is engineered, but it looks like you throw a bunch of logs into the stream. But it just really promotes fish habitat. It promotes like floodplain reconnection. It just kind of makes these streams where maybe humans have unnaturally removed the wood, or, you know, some of the trees have died off unnaturally or been cut. So it's kind of restoring the streams kind of to more natural function using natural materials. So that's also kind of a co-connection to that project. I think it's through multi-state RCPP funded by NRCS. So that's the big one in Warner. I want to say that Tyson has some tree plantings potentially planned in the Warner, but I'm not entirely sure.
I was also kind of curious about that dam removal in Francistown.
Yeah.
So like, what's the project like? I mean, you know, it just seems to me it would be nice and simple to just, you know, why doesn't it's a privately owned dam, right? And what's the big deal? You know, couldn't he just, I don't know, just take a shovel and get rid of the dam, right? Obviously, it's not that simple, right?
Yeah, you are correct. In terms of dam removals, it is on the simpler side. I'm gonna knock on some wood here to, you know, hopefully I don't jinx myself in the future. This particular dam removal, the landowner was just interested to get rid of it. It's not really causing flooding issues to like his house or his barn or anything, but it is causing ecosystem troubles. I don't know if that photo showed it, but the unnatural ponding behind it has killed off a lot of natural species of trees, and they're just kind of dead and have been hanging out, and he just wants to kind of get it back to a more natural functioning stream. So this one was really put forward by the landowner himself, because it is rather small and it's on the exempt list from the Dam Bureau, things have been going a little bit more smoothly. Usually when you hear about other dam removals, they're much more complicated. You know, there's often a historical context to them, which is something we're working with the Department of Historical Resources on. To mitigate, you know, any losses to the historical stuff. We want to keep those there, keep the stuff from the 1970s that can go out, but the stuff from like the 1800s should stay. So, you know, we're working through it. It's a process, but I think in terms of dam removals, it's relatively smooth. The hope is, you know, they did some surveys and there is still a natural channel like underneath that pond. So geomorphically, it seems likely that once, you know, that structure is out, the river will find its natural spot again and return itself pretty quickly without too much human intervention. Sometimes with these older dams, you have issues around sediment contamination. This is a pretty rural area. There's no known industry upstream that would have caused toxic sediments to build up behind that dam. So that's also just helps us move that sediment downstream naturally. We'll do a grade control structure. So where that dam is now, we'll just slowly kind of step it down and solidify those banks to make sure that we don't have any cutting of the banks or of the bed itself, kind of when that new river gets installed. Might have been a longer answer than you were expecting.
But I'm really impressed.
Yeah,
I
that
mean, I
was-
had no idea a lot of that went into the removal of a dam, you know?
Yeah, and imagine when the dam gets higher than 6 feet like this one is, it does get a lot more complicated. But it does open up all the way up to the headwaters in that section of the river. So that's also really exciting for fish spawning and movement and stuff like that for our cold brookies, cold water brook trout.
Whenever we deal with fish or rivers, we've got to advertise the benefits to the people drinking the water downstream. Manchester is now taking water out of the Merrimack. Nashua, Lawrence, Haverhill.
I think Concord in the future will as well.
Yeah, so we're not just helping the fish, we're helping keeping New Hampshire populated. When the western cities, they're under drought stress for many years now, where are those people going to go when the water's gone? Here we are.
Exactly. Yeah, and so that's, you know, the goal of the New Hampshire Source Water Protection Partnership, and many of the people that you saw listed are partners within that, but kind of just promoting this fact is, you know, the cleaner our natural areas are, the more forested lands we have, the better our water is going to be for us, for drinking, for bathing, for swimming, also for our animal friends as well and our fish friends. So it's really a win-win to do these restoration and conservation projects.
Well, thank you very much. And we hope to see you on the 23rd at the baseball game. We can pick up where we left off here. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
And we move to Kathy with the Connecticut River Organization.
This is going to be a lot of echoing what Lauren just said in certain ways. With maybe a couple little slight differences, but again, yeah, so Kathy Urfer I'm the river steward in Vermont and New Hampshire right now for Connecticut River Conservancy. And we've been around for like 67 years, since 1952, as a watershed organization working on the Connecticut River. And for many years, we were called the Connecticut River Watershed Council, and just recently changed our name. So here are the river stewards. We have a little bit of staff shifting going on right now. In this picture, you see Ron, who Lauren was just talking about, who she'll be meeting with tomorrow. Ron Rhodes, who is now our restoration manager in all 4 states. Myself, Andrea Donlin, who is our outgoing Massachusetts river steward. And then next to her is Kelsey Wentling, who had been working in the state of Connecticut and is migrating upstream to become our Massachusetts river steward. And we're going through a hiring process right now where we're going to be adding a New Hampshire river steward, releasing me from my schizophrenic experience for the past 5 years, and a new Connecticut river steward. So we're expanding at the moment. And just as a refresher, here's the watershed. So if you walk west from the Merrimack up the hill, you come down the other side, you have entered the Connecticut River watershed. So, you know, sister sheds right next door. The Connecticut River encompasses 4 states. There's a little tiny bit in Canada, a little tiny bit in Maine that cross the border. And then the river enters into Long Island Sound. So again, we soon will have river stewards in all 4 watershed states. And for the past 5 years, my role has been really working on the watershed in both Vermont and New Hampshire. So when you look at the smaller watershed breakdown, it's all of the ones here in blue on the western, not quite half, third maybe of New Hampshire. And then on the Vermont side, it's sort of the, you know, the eastern half, little less than half of the Vermont watersheds. And so similar to what Lauren said, you know, our work is focused on addressing in general impacts to our rivers. And so depending on the day, the content of my work can be very different, right? It might be commenting on a NPDES permit or some other, you know, looking for some other sort of illicit discharge as evidenced in that picture. You know, one of the other impacts still is trash in all of our watersheds because of our inability so far to find ways to actually create a circular waste stream, right? And start using what we consider waste. We still have to figure out how to solve that problem and reuse things and create things in a way so that we don't create trash ultimately. Stormwater issues, of course. You know, I was reflecting with some of the kids I've been working with lately that, you know, when you think about the Connecticut River in 1950, it was an open sewer. And to imagine that now is so disgusting, right? Like a lot of people, it's clear you swim, people are out in boats. And so to think of it that way, it's almost, you know, it's almost hard to fathom, just like hard to fathom the Cuyahoga River burning, right? But yet we look at the water when it rains that runs in our storm drains and we think it looks normal, you know, like we're used to that. And I have to actively remind myself that a big source of the pollution right now is stormwater, right? So it's the stuff that's coming off of our built surfaces. And to have it look like this and enter our river is not okay. And we have to re-see what that impact means. Also, in the face of climate change, you know, really extreme differences in our weather patterns. And we've seen it, you know, even in the past 10 years. This is a picture from Tropical Storm Irene taking a road out in Brattleboro. Or maybe that is Bennington, actually. But it happened all over both of our states. And, you know, sort of in partner with this, we're going to be facing droughts at the end of summer. And so paying attention to how these changes are coming and trying to adapt to get in front of them is a really big part of our work. And then another piece of our work, which I hadn't expected when I took the job, is the amount of work we have to do around hydro relicensing. So we engage a lot in hydro relicensing, trying to get the best deal for our river and the tributaries in the next license. And these licenses last 30 to 50 years. So once in a lifetime chance. So some examples of our work in response to the impacts. A lot of advocacy work around regulations, permits, and rules and legislation. So we lobby, we comment on permits, we comment on rulemaking, you know, kind of get into the weeds as much as we can on that stuff. We engage in a bunch of different community science efforts, all up and down the watershed, some aquatic invasive species work. More of that happens in the lower part of the watershed in Connecticut because there's just more impact down there. Up our way, we're doing sea lamprey nest surveys to help the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service with their management plans around sea lamprey, which is an important migratory species in the Connecticut River. And then water quality testing and sampling. We try to get people out on the river because you only take care of what you love. So part of our work is helping people to redevelop a relationship with their waterways. So we do a lot of paddling events, getting people out. The restoration work, similar to what Lauren was talking about, a lot of dam removals and stream bank restoration and riparian buffer work. And we have primarily been doing that work up in Vermont and New Hampshire, and are trying to move it more, to do more in Massachusetts and Connecticut. And then outreach and education. And so just digging into each one of those a little bit, our advocacy work, this is why we work a lot with dams. I think as a general populace, people are not aware of the number of dams in our watershed. These are both hydroelectric dams and just dams that were built 100 years ago for a mill or a pond or something. And now the woods have grown up around them and they're not being used for anything. So, you know, sort of the example that Lauren gave, there's a lot of dams that are not being used for a particular benefit right now, and are getting silted in and are becoming more and more like a liability to the landowners who own them. And so because of the nature of the geography of New England, we end up focusing on dams in our advocacy work. And why, you know, our creatures have adapted to free flowing rivers. And when you dam a river, it changes the habitat above and below the dam by having the river drop too much sediment above, which changes the bottom habitat, and not enough sediment below, which has had a really intense impact on our freshwater mussels all through the watershed. There's 12 native freshwater mussels, 8 of them are listed as endangered or threatened. And then water quality issues, because as the water slows down, it heats up. So you get lower dissolved oxygen, you get warmer water, which, you know, does not support your cold water like trout species, but supports more warmer water species. All kinds of, you know, issues like that. And just the barrier to migration for both people and creatures. One of the big things we've been involved in for literally a decade now is the hydro relicensing of these 5 facilities in what we call like the heart of the Connecticut River. So 3 of them are up between Vermont and New Hampshire, 2 in Massachusetts, excuse me. And these are pretty large hydroelectric facilities. They are this license, last time they were licensed was 1979, which was the point at which they were required to put in fish passage. And so under this relicensing, we're hoping for a lot of improvements to increase the ecological health of the river over the next 50 years. Improvements to fish passage, you know, additional recreation, changes in how they actually operate that are more amenable to how species migrate through the river and live in the river. So working really hard to engage in this public process. And kind of as an example of that, this would be the ideal sort of way you would see fish migrate that are coming up from the ocean, right? The Holyoke Dam in Massachusetts is the first big obstacle on the Connecticut River. So if you think about American shad as a species migrating, you know, ideally you have this many shad, you know, times 1,000 each, at least, coming through the Holyoke Dam. And then some of them would go and find places to spawn in the tributaries before they hit Turner's Falls. But so then you might have this many come through Turner's Falls. Some of those go find places to spawn, and you have this many come through Vernon, right? What we're seeing right now is really terrible passage at Turner's Falls, which is one of the facilities that's being relicensed. And so we want to see pretty significant improvements in how they pass fish around Turner's Falls. Turner's Falls has a long canal, so the fish have to find their way through 2 passage facilities. And so we're hoping that under this new license, they will make some changes so that there's one passage spot and that it's an elevator, which are much more efficient at passing fish than fish ladders. And the passage at Vernon is pretty good for the fish that get up there from Turner's Falls, but improvements can be made there as well. And it's also different for the different species of fish, right? So an American eel wants to pass upstream differently than how an American shad would. Another piece of our advocacy work is this big river cleanup we do every year, which we've been doing for 26 years through the whole watershed. We literally have thousands of volunteers come out and pull trash out of the river. We have some sites that we call the big sites that are managed by our staff, which are, you know, the situations where you see something like that, where there's a crane and we're pulling a car out. After Irene, we're still finding big propane tanks where we need help or someone to cut it apart underwater, and then we pull it out in pieces. So those bigger sites we manage and then rely on volunteer groups all through the watershed to spend a weekend in September to go and pick up trash. And we tally the trash and we use the data that we collect towards advocacy to try to reduce the waste stream for those things that are showing up a lot, right? Which is single-use plastics, tires, you know, cigarette butts. There's certain things that are that make up a lot of what we end up picking up. And then similar to what Lauren said, community science. So we support a lot of water quality monitoring all through the watershed. I include this slide often when I'm talking to Vermont communities because there's a huge amount of focus on phosphorus issues around the lakes. And this may be true in New Hampshire as well. There's a TMDL on Lake Champlain for phosphorus. And I try to use this just to explain a little bit of the chemistry of what happens with phosphorus as opposed to nitrogen. And so we have phosphorus and nitrogen as a pollutant in all of our waterways in both states, and they're both problematic. What happens in freshwater is that phosphorus becomes the catalyst for algae growth in freshwater, which then causes die-offs and loss of oxygen. Nitrogen is the catalyst in saltwater. So, you know, there's a huge kind of dead area in the Long Island Sound. And as, you know, one of the larger drainages, that the largest drainage that enters into the Sound, we are a contributor of nitrogen going into the Sound and impacting it. So, you know, in a lot of our work, we try to ignore our political boundaries and really think about the health of the watershed and how the water connects as the goal. And so there is a TMDL, and I can explain that if folks have questions about what that is, and the Long Island Sound, with an effort to reduce nitrogen, which is causing essentially anoxic zones or areas where there's no oxygen in the Sound. And just to kind of drive it home, this is what Tropical Storm Irene brought to the Sound. This is basically our farm fields up here in Vermont and New Hampshire entering into the Sound right after that huge storm. So community science work, in terms of our water quality monitoring, we host a website that covers all 4 states that collates E. coli results to try to help folks understand where they're swimming, where there's first contact recreation, whether there are issues with E. coli in runoff or in their swimming areas. And we've started just a pilot testing for plastics, microplastics, to start to understand how they're showing up in the watershed. And we support, so if there's smaller groups, smaller watershed groups doing water quality monitoring, we support them to the extent that they need help, if they need help. And then where there are areas where it's not being tested, we try to fill in and test, but we still have not quite yet been able to hit the whole watershed. And this is what I mentioned is one of the other community science efforts right now are sea lamprey nest surveys. So these little creatures I love, they're my favorite. They're like super creepy fish if no one knows about them, and they have like little teeth, round teeth, sucker mouths. When they when they migrate up the Connecticut River in the spring, they are literally going blind and dying, and they're using the last of their fat reserves to spawn. And they use their creepy little sucker mouth to build nests in shallow streams when they come up into the tributaries, when they spawn there. And so we have been doing walking the streams essentially to locate where sea lamprey nests are, to measure them, and to provide data for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and their management of the species. So and as I said, recreation. We help post the Connecticut River Paddlers Trail, which is there's a phone app now. It's essentially a paddling trail where you could paddle the whole river from the headwater. Well, not quite the headwaters because they're too shallow, but quite north, all the way down to the Long Island Sound. And there are a series of primitive campsites along the river that are mostly only accessible by the river. The app shows access areas, and what we're trying to do with the app is actually make the connection to the recreation economy in towns along the river, so that folks who may be on the river know where they can get off the river to go to a B&B or to go get supplies, or have a nice meal, or whatever the case may be. And again, we host a bunch of different kinds of paddles. This year we're hosting this is the first year we're doing it, the New England Paddle Sport Championship, which will be Sunday, August 7th in Brattleboro. And we're building a river fest that would include Saturday and Sunday this year to sort of help bring people to the river and rethink about like how you could get in the river, fishing, recreation, and how you access it. And then some of our restoration work. So we were talking about dam removals. Ron, in his magical state, is taking out about 3 to 4 dams a year, which means he's managing 12. So each one of these dam removals can take 3 to 5 to 6 years to actually complete. We identify the funding to do the engineering work, and then funding for the actual removal. In this case, this one was on the Ashwila in West Swansea. And you can see there on the right, the dam is removed, and then we always replant the banks. And the engineering design is done in a way to find, as Lauren was saying, the natural channel, and then to restore the upland around it. And so looks a little scraggly right after it, but it takes a very short period of time, a year or two, before like the river is fully kind of rebounding and we have passage. This is the removal of a small dam that was literally in the woods. It's a tributary of the West River in Vermont, concrete dam, which we took out about 4 years ago. So a lot of little small dams. This may have been a pond at some point for a farmer in the 60s or something, but it's just not being used anymore. So these we try to get out. And then we work a lot with farmers and landowners on buffer plantings and coming in to restore riparian buffers along the stream. And it's always a situation like if you're haying the land or you're a vegetable farmer or something, you're having to take part of that out of production. But the gift back to the river for healing the river and frankly keeping your farmland intact is pretty important. And so the more that we do this work, the more we kind of get more opportunities, really from word of mouth. We do some targeted project development, but a lot of the work that comes to us is really because of people telling their neighbors or other people they know about work done on their land. So we're really grateful every time we're able to do some sort of restoration project like that. And then outreach and education. So these two examples, on the left here is a floodplain restoration project that is being done not by us, but by the Brattleboro Housing Partnership that owns the property. And this property in this schematic, this is a senior housing in Brattleboro along the Whetstone Brook. This flooded in Irene. The houses were filled with like 1 to 2 feet of sediment. really devastating. And so over the last 10 years, the Housing Authority has built a new facility, upland, and has moved our senior citizens literally out of the floodway, out of Danger's Way. And then they have been working on this restoration project. And so I'm working with a couple of the schools in Brattleboro and on a larger plan in the community to focus on the Whetstone Brook, the health of the brook, what this floodplain restoration means, and to put forward an effort to reclassify this river for its fishery, which has a pretty strong fishery, even though it is an urban stream. And on the right, there's a picture of, this is also in Brattleboro, a parking deck, which we've been working with some local artists for several years who call themselves Ask the River, who have been doing all kinds of art making to engage the community and thinking about like their relationship to the river, how they feel about the river. And so as part of that effort, they created a sculpture that is part of the parking deck in Brattleboro now. And we renamed each of the deck levels around some of the migratory and other species that rely on the Connecticut River. And there's information there. This is on the ground floor on each of those species. So trying to find lots of different ways to continue to help people envision the river. And that's it. I feel like I'm in the privileged position to mostly get to love in my job. And I'm glad to, come and speak to folks and make more relationships and more connections, things like that.
Well, that was very informative. We might be able to help with some of the advocacy if we can write letters of support for both of you for different things that you need to testify to. Also, one of the things we would like to do is set up reciprocal memberships with other organizations. And we need to define what that would be. It may be just listing what's going on with your organization on our website, or it might get more elaborate. So we'll have to come up with how do we want to help each other type of document.
Yeah, we'd love to talk about that. Dick, actually, I think it was Sullivan County and Cheshire County conservation districts held a what do we call it? A hydropower coffee hour last year, so that I could reach into other parts of the community to help people understand the hydro relicensing, which is a pretty obtuse thing to understand. But yeah, really grateful for those connections and partnering that way.
And I think the district conservationists they're on the ground. They know their county so well and what's happening and where the issues are. So just kind of having a team of people that can come back with ideas or whatever is really, really powerful for someone like Kathy or I, who are kind of looking at the landscape level and don't have the opportunity to go kind of visit these hot spots for restoration.
Yes. Are there any comments or questions? Well, we are at 8 o'clock. Thank you, Kathy and Lauren, for a great presentation this evening. And we'll see you on June 23rd, I hope.
Great.
Sounds good. See you then. Thanks for having us.
Okay.
Thank you.
See you, everybody.